Good afternoon and welcome to the Federal Executive Forum celebrating 20 years of profiling excellence in government IT mission programs. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will be discussing best practices with artificial intelligence and machine learning strategies and programs in the federal government. With me on today's show are John Elliott, Acting Director, Artificial Intelligence Rapid Capability Cell, Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, Department of Defense. Ramesh Menon, Chief Technology and Artificial Intelligence Officer, Defense Intelligence Agency. Stuart Wagner, Chief Data and Artificial Intelligence Officer, Department of Navy. John Dvorak, Chief Technology Officer, Red Hat Public Sector. Greg Carl, Principal Technologist, Pure Storage. And Chad Cisco, Chief Customer Officer at Data Robot. Well, we got a new administration. We got a quick executive order that came out right after that. Basically unleashed the dogs on AI, so to speak. John, you've got a new unit. Looks like maybe you stood it up over there. Tell us about this rapid capability cell and what the function of that is and what you all are up to over there. John Elliott, of course, I'm speaking of.
Yeah, thank you. It's wonderful to be here. So the AI Rapid Capability Cell was stood up in December, and its mission is to maintain the United States' advantage in frontier AI technologies by informing DoD research and development, investment priorities, integration strategy, and pioneering the infrastructure so that we can scale AI adoption. Uh, Really, to maintain this competitive edge, the ARC is rapidly integrating advanced AI technologies into DoD operations through a 90-day pilot cycles to rapidly adopt and utilize the new frontier AI technologies and generative AI and get them in the hands of DoD users, warfighters, to understand where they are most effective and how we can rapidly scale those capabilities across the hundreds of thousands of personnel within the Department of Defense.
So such a rapid developing technology. You want to get it, I guess it's out of the petri dish at that point, into production, into the warfighter space. I think it's a fantastic idea. Hats off to the DoD for coming up with that concept. Ramesh, speaking of the DoD, looks like another combination of the Chief Technology and Artificial Intelligence Officer. We're starting to see that a lot across the various departments. Not sure how long you've had that combined role. Tell us what's happening in that respect.
So technically, it's not necessarily a combined role. I was hired as a CTO, and after 2 years, I took on additional responsibilities as the Chief
Gotcha.
AI Officer. So technically, it's like I have three roles. I'm the Chief Technology Officer, I'm the Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer, and I'm the Deputy Director for a task force SABRE that is going to accelerate AI capabilities within our combatant commands and our agency. So
No good deed goes unpunished, right?
So this basically all comes down to the executive order that President Trump issued in January, right? Executive Order
Yep.
14179, removing barriers to American leadership in artificial intelligence. And that's where a lot of the investments priorities, coupled with the innovations we see in private sector, with the rapid acceleration of the transformer models and GPT-4 and moving closely towards artificial general intelligence. So I think we are forced to some level by external market forces to leverage the power of digital platforms, data, and algorithms to create new value for our national security. And that's where it's really coming down to. And how do we pivot to this opportunity and ensure that America continues to lead in this area?
Very important aspect and very quick turnaround of an executive order to unlock that capability and allow you all to go, so to speak, in introducing these capabilities to the warfighter. Stuart, how about over at Department of the Navy? A lot of activity going on over there, another dual role, if you will. Tell us about the state of the action going on over there at Navy.
Yeah, there's kind of a tale of two stories at the Department of the Navy. Thanks for having me on, Luke. The
Seeing you.
story there's kind of a good side and a bad side to the story. So the good side of the story is that increasingly there's emphasis within the Department of Navy on telemetry data. So that is automatically collected data of operational systems. It's particularly relevant because many of our platforms are afloat, often disconnected. The downside is we're not yet capturing all of that data, i.e. collecting it, getting it off the ships, and being able to learn and adapt from it. So I think the culture is moving there, and we're starting to make investments in that, but those investments have been, at least from the past, been relatively slow. Now, though, I think we're starting to accelerate. There's some other excitement at the Department of the Navy. So the Marines published their AI strategy last year. We're seeing an increase on the bias of action. And then we're also seeing a focus on zero trust, which is important. Cyber protections are notably really important in being able to combine data and have confidence that you can combine data without it potentially being captured. And so we've made quite some advancements with flank speed. Over back to you, Luke.
Thank you, and good catch on the ship play there. And I'm sure this whole concept of AI on the edge is something that you all are focusing on. Maybe we'll hear more about that later. Greg, how about at Pure Storage? You're well beyond the storage play at this point. Introduced into the community just in time. Tell us about sort of the state of the state as to what you're seeing to help unlock this capability across these various agencies.
That's a good question, Luke, and thank you for having me this afternoon. So what we've found is kind of what we've known for the past 5 or 6 years has become put to the forefront now. Data challenges are still very prevalent. Sprawl, processing times, cost, like this is nothing new. But what's great is that as an industry, we've all said, hey, if we want to operate in the federal space, security and a ZTA focus are table stakes, right? It's no longer an afterthought, something you have to tack on. It's now something from a holistic perspective we have to address. Well, you take it from the other side is from the data layer, there's big challenges when you look at the enterprise sprawl and capabilities, whether it's on the civilian side, on the security side, does not matter. Data ingest and curation pipelines, as well as AI training and deployment pipelines. How can I do it all in the same time without the holdbacks or the challenges of sprawl silos, everything we talked about before, right? Because it's not just about performance anymore. It's about how can I have a faster, as we say, time to science. It's not just about I can process data faster, I can process exabytes of data at scale. It's how can I have that consistency of experience. So that's one thing we're addressing with customers. Density, right? Some of our customers have told us that they need another way to scale. We actually had an announcement at NVIDIA GTC of our FlashBlade Exa platform. We're talking about multiple terabits per second of performance at scale, and we kind of put that whole conversation to rest because it's kind of how it's inherently our system has always worked over the years. So it's designed for hyperscale and inference, ingest, and analytics at the same time. And a lot of our customers are saying, look, I'm not quite at a hyperscaler level, but I would like to get down that path of economics, consistency, and ingest into pipeline and automation. So it's really been a huge level up effort across the board, and we're helping customers get there because it's not just about a product, it's about the long-term vision and outcome.
Yeah, and it's not just about the amount of storage, which is incredibly important with all this telemetry, but it's the speed to be able to access as well. And you all are doing a fantastic job there as keeping in front of that technology curve. John Javorjak, let's talk about Red Hat and where you fit into this capability. You started way back in the day with some straight up, container type of capabilities, and boy, you all got here just in time as well. Give us a state of state as to
Sure.
where you all sit in this ecosystem.
Right. Yeah, I love Gray's comments because a lot of what everyone's looking at right now is how to be more efficient, how to understand data faster, how to get to the right data, how to exploit that data. So a couple of things we're doing that I'll mention. One is a technique that is developed in the open source community. It's called virtual LLM or VLLM, something you can look up, worth looking up. And this is an efficient way. It's an inference server that speeds up the output of generative AI applications and makes better use of GPU memory. So this is the big thing. Like when we're talking about on float rather implementations. You want to be able to run on lower end computers, potentially edge devices. You want to be able to do this in a more efficient way with less GPU, less CPU. This is a great example of the kinds of technologies that we're seeing in the open source community, which is just blowing it away with great techniques. We've seen up to 24 times faster inference using this technique. We're able to use fewer GPUs, and we're able to handle more simultaneous requests from users. on much smaller hardware. So this is something you're going to see more of. You're going to see this over the next several years, like just the open source community just coming up with these brilliant ideas. Another thing I'll probably talk about a little bit later too is we're working with small language models, so large LLMs that are much smaller, that are tuned for customers with customer data, and we're seeing also using these techniques the ability to again work on a much smaller footprint inside network boundaries, inside security boundaries, and getting a lot of the same responsiveness that you see with large language models, but in a sovereign environment. So those are two areas of many that are going on in the open source community, which we're happy to bring to the table to our government customers.
You know, there's a lot of smart people out there, and you get all these brains crowdsourcing on these ideas, and it really is incredible when they start to pressure test these capabilities and get incredible efficiencies out of the use of these technologies. So appreciate you all driving that forward. Chad, Data Robot, born as an AI company, always will be an AI company. Give us a status to where you all are, and it looks like you got a nice footprint across the federal space as well.
Yeah, that's right, Luke. Hello, and what pleasure to be back on the forum again. Yeah, Data Robot, we are a AI application platform, close to 10 years now, building originally traditional machine learning, now leaning into both the generative and agentic workflows in terms of applications. And where we found a really sweet spot is, for the most part, our commercial customers have been a little bit ahead of the government over the last few years. And so we've learned what's working well in the commercial space, and then using our knowledge of, in particular, Department of Defense, to really modify those applications to drive value in the DoD. And where we've seen that work really well, I think, is in three areas. So talent management. A couple different departments are using us to get some predictions and better understanding of things like attrition and performance. And then readiness, those are the obvious readiness things. How many aircraft are going to be available next week, next month for a given wing or squadron? And the one that's really getting a lot of attention right now, as you can imagine, is our financial management capabilities. So things like waste, fraud, and abuse, which we've done hundreds of times in the commercial sector. And we've starting to get a lot of interest now in the DoD in particular, to see how we can use AI to make it more efficient to do some of those checks around waste, fraud, and abuse. Or we've also found some success in things like unliquidated obligations, and helping different departments understand how much money will we actually spend on each contract, and therefore can we reposition some of those precious resource dollars to other areas. So yeah, we're finding that to be really an area of interest that we expect to grow, at least in the short term.
Amen. Amen. That's such a slam dunk use case, and boy, that's just house money, isn't it? I love to see those capabilities unleashed on things like that. So really do appreciate you working with the various agencies mining for gold, so to speak. All right, let's talk about specific examples. Ramesh, I'm going to go to you. Would love to talk about a specific use case that you'd like to highlight, a program you'd like to highlight, where you all are doing some really fantastic things here.
Well, thanks for the question. On most of the work we do are TSSCI, but I can give some unclassified examples. DIA's responsibility is to fuse intelligence for the Department of Defense, which means we take SIGINT, TUMINT, GEOINT, take all those information, fuse that information, and create the common intelligence picture to support our warfighting missions, like basically the SIP and COP. But that information is now very, very important given the proliferation of unmanned platforms. And how do we counter our adversaries with speed and scale and precision? So we are working hard to build on the Mars platform that you might have heard in the past at DODAS and other events, which is the machine-assisted rapid repository system, a replacement for our legacy MIDB platform, to fuse intelligence to create decision advantage for the nation. So we, on behalf of Department of Defense, we have a responsibility to fuse the intelligence for Department of Defense, and that will support our ongoing operations downstream.
What a fantastic capability as you're pulling all that information together to do some of the stuff that you do. And we certainly appreciate and respect the fact that you can only go so far with explaining those different use cases. So thanks for all you do there. Greg, how about at Pure Storage? Can you give us an example? You all are striped across the various department and agencies, striped across the public sector. Give us a great use case here.
Yeah, so I talked about earlier, agencies looking at hyperscale sort of methodologies, right? We're not at that scale yet, but I like to operate that way to get a way to have the distribution layer. So the past few weeks, you might have seen there was a blog released by Meta about how they're utilizing Pure and our direct flash module technology, not only from the lens of performance, but also density, data center environmental metrics, power cooling footprint, things that are becoming more and more prevalent, especially as we talk about smaller modular workplaces, right? Where we're generating data at the edge and distributed cores. But across the many verticals of Fed and healthcare, it's interesting. We're actually finding out that our products, because they just run, right, for a lot of our customers, they're not something you have to fine tune over and over again. AI workflows have just kind of been put on our products. We didn't even know. It's like, oh, you're actually doing multiple frames of ingest and inference on this platform that was just running SQL a few months ago. So it's good to know that we're able to kind of get in front of some of those things. So as agencies are developing more and more capabilities and more robust frameworks, that they can then build out that consistent framework and infrastructure. So it's more about the long-term experience that every agency has had with our platform, but it's also about, hey, great, I've seen the value of all flash, I've seen the value of consistency of Pure Storage platform at scale, but how can I then take that and go even further? So I think right now, from an infancy to from a maturity model perspective, does not matter. You have the same look and feel and experience with your data and data from our data services and management perspective.
Outstanding. Really do appreciate that. John Elliott, would you like to highlight a specific initiative that you all are working on there?
Yeah, I think one of the things we've seen is that both the industry and the frontier AI companies are going to be and plan to be the leader in the development of generative AI and these new capabilities, and also that industry itself is quickly adopting these technologies, and there's a lot that the DoD can learn from that. So in many cases with the AI rapid capability, so our goal is to take and lift and shift, the great ideas of how industry is already applying use of generative AI into our workflows. Because the DoD, in addition to our warfighting functions, is also like the largest healthcare provider, some of the largest financial systems and HR systems, like my previous speaker talked about. And so our goal is to help do rapid pilots around both those, use cases that industry has already leveraged, and then we're trying to scale over to our systems as well as also on the warfighting side. So covering those with two quick examples on the industry side, to the point earlier on financial data and audit is both a large priority as well as also an area that is rapidly being adopted with generative AI in the financial sector. So we are looking at projects like, given the large number of transactions that the DoD has with financial data, how can we help use generative AI to reconcile transactions and recommend and root cause, mistransactions to help identify issues in our financial system and also get us ready for audit. And then similarly, goal is to support our warfighters, and how does generative AI and frontier AI technologies improve our workflows and performance, looking at examples across our COCOMs where you have analysts and warfighters consuming multimodal data inputs, where they'll get audio input in, visual input, raw sensor data in, and how can we then use generative AI to help synthesize that data and provide, even if it's as basic as root summarization of, all the possible data sources that just came in that they normally have to click through multiple screens, into just high level summaries of that, so that they can then triage better and then go right to the most critical piece of data they need to help inform a commander's decision.
Amen. I love the catch on the audit assistance. Obviously, the timing couldn't be better on that one. And I really hope that the audience out there that's listening to this adopts this concept of this, supercell unit that you've developed there. I think that's an excellent idea. So appreciate that. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about AI. We're actually getting into some very interesting use cases, and I'm going to throw it over to you, John Dvorak at Red Hat. And once again, you're in the catbird seat there. You're striped across various agencies. Give us an example of one you'd like to highlight where you all are doing some outstanding things.
Well, I'm gonna pull on a thread a little bit that John Elliott and Ramesh set up, which is disconnected environments.
Right.
We've been focusing a lot on what we call private or sovereign AI implementations. This is worldwide. This is not just in the US, but with our other public sector customers around the world. And these are scenarios where we're keeping the entire workflow within the agency's security boundary. So that's the training and aligning of the model, all the testing of the model, the deployment, the monitoring of the model, and all of the data exploitation that may occur. That's all happening within that boundary. So all inference is also occurring in the boundary. So you're not asking a question and it's going out to some commercial provider and giving you a response. That's all done within the environment. And so with that, we're also able to do things like improving semantic search. So in some of these cases, we are taking your prompt that you have and adjusting that prompt to best utilize search and then go across a number of different search databases rather to bring back relevant information. Now, thinking about this from a sort of a civilian example, I was thinking one thing we're doing sort of healthcare, there's something called ambient dictation. And if any of you have been to the doctor recently, I was just last week and this was used. It's amazing. Instead of the doctor sitting there typing away as you're talking to them and giving you all your symptoms and things like that, they're listening to you, but they're recording the conversation. That conversation is then being converted into structured data. It's imported into your electronic health record, and then they go in and they modify that after the call, but they're listening to you. And the point of this is like, I wouldn't trust that if that information was leaving the environment. That whole environment, that listening to you, that translation process, that use of the model, and the conversion to internally to a data source is all kept within the environment. And so those are the types of things we're able to do within health settings, within intelligence settings. And that I think you're going to see just many more of those types of implementations as the technology gets better and we're able to miniaturize all these capabilities within agencies.
Wow, that's fantastic, and I really do appreciate the highlighting of that use case. Certainly does come in handy, that that AI backend in these various capabilities. Hadn't heard of that one, so thanks for pointing that out. Stuart, how about at the Department of Navy? I'm sure you've got a plethora of use cases. Give us one whopper that you'd like to highlight.
Sure. Well, there's a couple things I'll note. The first is I helped organize, as some of the people on the line here know, the Bravo Hackathon series, which basically took protected and classified data, brought it to a sandboxed environment at the enterprise level, and allowed people to basically develop and adapt capabilities rapidly over the course of a week from those protected and classified data. The outcomes of that have been quite interesting. One is part of the National Defense Authorization Act. There was actually a law that was part of that actually requires the Department of Defense to now run at least 4 hackathons per year, which has been great output from those events. And it includes focus on combatant commands and military services. At least 2 must be from combatant commands, 2 from military services. And so there's been some progress there at kind of a socio-technical level to kind of solve problems using artificial intelligence and data. The Department of Navy, where I sit, put out a structured challenges memo about a year ago as a consequence as well of running these hackathons, which called out hackathons and structured challenges. Since that time, we've run about 60 structured challenges. In addition, most recently, Data Science at Sea, a Navy component that basically learns and adapts military technologies at sea, actually helped participate and organize a hackathon with the French and US Navy, the first, to my knowledge, coalition partner hackathon using protected and classified data. And the outcomes were quite positive, recently advertised. Replicator, if you look at Replicator, I believe John works a little bit on that program or has worked on that program. Replicator at the OSD CDAO level, DIU, has been making great progress, has a lot of connections to the Department of the Navy as well. And so finally, I'll note to John's point, he talked about using artificial intelligence technologies for audit. The Marine Corps, of course, recently had its first clean audit, the first military branch to achieve a clean audit,
Bravo.
housed in Jupiter, a tenant of Advana. And Jupiter, a program I manage, was critical to that success. So a number of projects, a policy, and successful outcomes coming out across the DoD as well as at the Department of Navy level.
Once again, my Marines taking the hill. I appreciate that. I'm just curious, how many people participate in these hackathons?
Yeah,
Is it
so it
hundreds,
varies.
thousands?
Yeah, so it really varies.
Yeah.
It's as small as around 15 or 20 people
Okay.
in some cases. These are kind of small, really focused, structured challenges. We're going to go
Small but
solve a
mighty.
particular problem.
Mhm.
CENTCOM, for example, held a small one. I think they called out the number publicly, so I think I can share it, which was about
Okay.
20 or 25 folks. They were
Okay.
focused on one-way and unmanned aerial systems, which was called out.
Yeah.
And so you can really focus on specific problems that remain that are relevant or remain relevant in a specific area. Some of our larger ones consists of almost upwards, I would say, above 500 people.
Wow.
And so
Okay.
some have been quite large and some have been much smaller, but they focus on problems.
Small but mighty group of badasses there. So we really do appreciate all that. Chad, how about over at Data Robot? Can you give us an example of a program, a project you would like to highlight?
Yeah, absolutely. Adding a little more detail to what I mentioned earlier, one of the really successful ones we found is this finding untapped funding, where you can leverage AI to understand which contracts out there just aren't progressing as fast as you expected in terms of the spend, highlighting those, and then deobligating them. In our first year of production on that one, the U.S. Army deobligated and reallocated a little over $2 billion from expiring Army contracts. So if you can think of the scale of additional activities they were able to accomplish with that new funding. And not only was it repositioning the funding, it also drove tremendous efficiencies for the team that was reviewing these projects. And so we estimate 3 to 5 times the or reduction in the amount of time it took to review contracts that had just allowed that team to go do many more things. So that's a very exciting use case. But what we're even more excited about is where we're going now in terms of taking that from a simple machine learning dashboards to say and turn it into, we'll start with a simple agent, which we've done with many of our customers already. And so now you can have a natural intuitive interface leveraging generative AI, right, to ask questions of that model. What are some current trends in fraud, or how are we seeing previous fraud cases play out? And not only will the agent answer that question specifically, but it's also built in a way to conduct additional analysis and kind of tell you the things also that maybe you didn't ask that are really relevant to that question. So we're doing that today with many of our commercial customers. And then where we're going next is what I mentioned in the beginning of agentic workflow or tool calling. And so now, as to research a fraud case, you may have to log into 3 to 5 different systems and then ultimately open your email and send one. And with the tool calling agent workflow, a single pane of glass can do all of that for you. So it'll research the particular fraud case, maybe check your policy database, tell you how this fraud case is looking, and then we can go so far even as to draft an email for you to send to some command and ask them about what this particular line item is. So we're really excited about that technology coming, and we're already starting to see some commercial customers leverage that, and we look forward to bringing it into the federal government as well.
Excellent. A better employee experience always makes a better customer experience. All right, we're going to start talking about priorities. I know this is always tough because there's a lot of them. John Elliott, I'm going to start with you. We're a quarter of the way through 2025 here, roughly. And what do you focus on? What do you sort of must get done in 2025 for you inside of your unit at this point?
Yeah, so I think there are 2 big priorities we're looking on. Like I talked a lot in the last segment, talked about the pilot cycles we're doing, and it's very important that we continue and finish out a couple of these rapid iterations of pilots to really help us understand how effective generative AI can be in these use cases that industry and the public sector in the larger public may not encounter, like in our warfighting mission use cases, to know where we can leverage it. I think the other big priority that we're really starting to focus on now and in the next couple of quarters is how can we also deploy generative AI tools at scale across the entire DoD for large scale experimentation. So that's how we've seen in industry a lot of the adoption and also the new use cases that are non-intuitive that we sitting at a desk can't think of are useful. It's the companies have provided the generative AI capability, frontier AI capability, be that either, through how I normally interact with my personal subscriptions, like the web interface or like my phone, provide those to to the company employees, and then they just start using it in their jobs. And you find these, drastic improvements in certain workflows because employees are incentivized if they want to do their work better and easier, and helping provide that infrastructure and the generative AI tools at scale on the, on the DoD scale at large, so that there are, any of the employees in the DoD can access multiple different solutions as we can explore and figure out what is the best way for the DoD to do this, is that, and also understand the need, like how much compute does the DoD need to facilitate generative AI? What type of infrastructure do we need, and what's the best way to access that?
You can really see the level of maturity when we first started having this particular topic on the show. Half the time we still talked about pliers and wires and how do we get the storage and the amount of computing and where are we going to get the APIs set up, et cetera. Now you're really just talking about the use, right? And optimizing the use, which I think is really refreshing and fantastic to see that. So we're moving along at light speed, let's say. John Dvorak, let's talk about at Red Hat, top priorities for the public sector that you all are focusing on. What's the demand signal right now that you're getting, that you're trying to roll out in the rest of 25?
Okay, great. So one of the areas we're focused on quite a bit is in improving the life cycle of model development for our customers. So in environments where they're tuning their own models, they're training their own models, they want to be able to track that model development just like they would code, just like they would software code. So be able to look at during that life cycle, what's changed, who changed it, what data was ingested, sign those models so that they can detect any kind of fraudulent behavior in that process. So that's something we're working through with our further development on our OpenShift model, our OpenShift environment. And then the other thing we're trying to improve is trust. So this is a challenge that generative AI has, is that models are probabilistic. So they are producing results which are not always guaranteed. And it's great if you're writing a short story, but if you're trying to extract important information from your data stores, you want more of a deterministic response. So we've been experimenting with using bots that are able to analyze the responses and challenge responses and try to improve responses just like a human would. So instead of you looking at it and saying, that's not quite right, I'm going to ask the question again. Imagine having bots do that, saying, no, that's not quite right. Nope, that's not quite right. Until you get a response that is something you're expecting, it's more deterministic. So we're going to see that. I think over the next couple of years, you're going to see that as being one of the big outcomes from a lot of work in generative AI, is this idea that having the AI system itself be a neural network, examining the responses, improving responses before you see them, all done behind the scenes. So we see that as being a high priority over the next 18 to 24 months.
Interesting, and really do appreciate that. Ramesh, how about at DIA? Top priorities for you in 2025? I know you've got a whole basket full there, but give us your top couple.
Yeah, we are very mission-focused, outcome-focused agency. So we obviously listen, understand, and overlay that with the threats we see, the macro trends that's happening, and ensure that we have a foundational capability that will be valuable and not just throwing away. We want to maximize our return on invested capital and collaborate, avoid duplication. So we are definitely very focused on outcomes. This year, 2024, we heard from many of our panel members here, is the year of AI agents. So at least from a DIA's perspective, we are building enterprise generative AI as a service on our classified networks is our goal. So hopefully this year we'll be able to roll it out to our broader DIE partners and within our various mission areas to use enterprise Gen AI as a service in a hybrid modality with a multimodal LLM supporting it, but across a hybrid model, whether it can be edge, integrating unmanned capabilities to manned missions, it could be on one of the frontier model clouds, or it could be in a air gap network somewhere in the world. We are in 100 plus countries, so we need to make sure our primary goal is to meet and exceed our mission partner expectations and priorities, right? Everything has to be worked backwards to see what is the underlying technology platform that will enable this mission. I know a lot of people, I mean, Stuart does a great job. I worked with him over the years, and he does a great job with experimentation, bringing rapid capabilities. Now, I think it's time we take these experiments and put it into our operating environment. How do we scale AI? How do we make sure we have right force structure to scale AI? What are the processes required? Do we have continuous model validation? How do we govern our models? So I created something called DODES Data Catalog, which is an enterprise model management repository on the classified network, so people can reuse these models, and it's very similar to some of our IC partners are having. So I think we are moving well. We are trying to scale, share information, and ensure that we have a solid AI governance framework as we scale and operationalize AI, while continuing to build on the partnerships and power of outside innovation models, working with our industry partners and learn from them, because there's a lot of innovations happening right now. And AI agent is step one. We have to learn to work with our machines in certain areas. And to do that, we need to understand how my operating model will change. Today, I'm doing A, B, C, and D. Tomorrow, it may be A, C, and D. So where are the opportunities for efficiency, automation, leveraging the power of digital platforms? Where should agents be introduced? What does it mean? Is that tradecraft compliant? So we have to ensure that the algorithms we create is compliant to the tradecraft. We have something called ICD 203. We have ICD 504 for data compliance. We have ICD 505 for AI compliance. So there's all kinds of regulatory frameworks we have to ensure while we accelerate and create these capabilities. So I think I'm relatively very confident DI is in a very good position. We are trying to bring our combatant commands in this journey with us. I do support some of the experimentation that's happening right now at different parts of the world. There are more coming with our partners and allies. So I think it really comes down to leveraging the power of digital platforms and extracting the value from your data using these innovative algorithms that many of our industry partners are creating.
Well, we really do appreciate all that sort of level setting there to unlock that capability to allow all these combatant commands leveraging the use of this technology. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about AI, specifically talking about top priorities. Chad, we're going to go to you. Top priority for Data Robot 2025.
Yeah, building on what John and Ramesh said, I think what we're finding is the most important thing to drive value with generative AI in particular at scale is getting the governance right. And so one of our priorities is working with our customers is making sure they've thought through and we can help them set up using our platform, guardrails around their models, controls of what questions are answered, how those answers come back, the traceability and tracking of answers and how people are using the models, so that a single kind of governing organization can see how all of their AI is using. I mentioned generative AI. That also includes all the machine learning models deployed and tracking them for performance and observability. So we're finding that to be a really important capability that our customers need to get value from both traditional ML and then generative AI going forward.
Excellent. Stuart, top priorities for you in 2025. I know you've got a bunch of them. Give us your top one or two.
Sure. Thanks, Luke. One of the critical things we want to do this year is publish a data and AI weaponization strategy. How do we weaponize our data and our digital technologies? And it's kind of oriented, I'll give you a sneak peek at how we're thinking about it. So we're really thinking quite closely about something we call night after. And I think this kind of orients against Ramesh's point and John's point about the need, like how do you basically leverage these enterprise technologies if such AI capabilities were available on the network? How would you use them? This is something we're really thinking closely about. So in night after, the basic idea is in the night after the start of a conflict, all commanders will face the same digital learning dilemma. Digital learning dilemma. Here's how it's articulated. In the night after the start of a conflict, how do you take the data from yesterday that was collected and the information that was collected, use it to fight better tomorrow? How do you adapt based on the automatic collection of data? And so we call that process going from the creation of data to a adaptation or effect, the bits to effect cycle. Basically, that's your timeline to adapt. And if you can do that, going from the creation of data to a data-driven effect faster than your adversary, you can adapt faster than them. But if you're slower, they adapt faster to you. This is important because in a protracted war where there's more learning cycles, you could potentially become better over time and compound your gains over time against an adversary. Vice versa, if they do it faster than us, they become better over the course of a war, a potential war, versus us. And so we're actually assessing the way in which we leverage data and AI technologies by the speed to effect. And that's notably what our data and AI weaponization strategy is focused on. One more point I'll make about this. It may not seem, that point may not seem obvious, but I'll give you an industry comparable. And John sort of touched on the use of observability tools. I think he implied instrumentation and telemetry in his comment. But if you look at all the big tech companies in the world, you cannot find one that delivers a product or service, a primary product or service, which is all of them, that do not undergird with the automatic collection of telemetry or automatically collected data and rapidly adapt their capabilities, small calibrations to compete. And notably, assertion here or hypothesis here, those that went out are the ones that are fastest to do it. So the question, you could kind of articulate this in another way. How can we adapt our operational systems like Facebook updates a newsfeed, like Google updates search, like SpaceX updates Starlink, like Tesla updates your car, right? And that is how we're thinking about the speed of adaptation during war.
I appreciate that, and that's a fascinating concept about the rapid iteration there. Really do appreciate that that element of the of this aspect. Greg, how about at Pure Storage? Top priority for you in 2025?
So it comes down to how can we, proactively address the larger problem is the amount of data being generated, right? So I think the prediction is something like 394 zettabytes, the amount of data is going to be generated by 2028. And what's interesting about that is we're closer to generating zero data than we are to that number right now. It's actually crazy, right? But transitioning customers to more of a data-centric approach for storage and cyber resilience, especially for AI, right? We're talking about here today. But to Stuart's point, something like night after, you need parallelism, speed, and analytics is key to churning that over the next day. How can I have a parallelized processing? How can I scale that out depending on the size of the conflict? But on the flip side of that is how can we also introduce for our customers cost efficiencies and long-term cost avoidance, right? Is every single aspect of my data being maximized? And having a way to be more efficient and transparent way to track data growth and introduce predictability and a better consumption model and show back for agencies, no matter where you are in the government. And the last concept is we're trying to introduce software capabilities not available for distributed data management today. I'm talking about inside the data center in the public cloud, does not matter, especially for secure environments, right? We're not talking about things that are dialing home and getting all the goodness of centralized AI capabilities, but those distributed environments with a new feature introduced called Fusion, right? It's not a new product. It's a way to manage different data sets consistently through a policy-driven framework, no matter where it is from a geo or a network perspective. So even down at the administrator level, talking, data administrators, storage administrators, we're no longer going to be talking about arrays in the data center. We're going to be talking about fleets aligned to strategic initiatives such as things like AI.
Amen, and really do appreciate that. Okay, we're going to impart some wisdom on the listening audience here. John Elliott, I'm going to start with you. You're at the vanguard of this capability. Top lesson learned that you would like to communicate out there to the audience.
Yeah, I think our biggest lessons learned follows along with my previous thoughts on the non-intuitive nature of how users are interacting with generative AI tools. We seen in industry and then also in the DoD as we've done our pilots and also providing these at scale, give these tools to the user, you give them the idea of like, hey, we think it's useful to help with this workflow, like help with, this summarization of data. Uh, and then they do that, they like it, and then in 2 weeks they're using it in 8 other different ways that you've never thought of before. And so that is great, and that's one of the big lessons learned is how general purpose these tools are and how ready the workforce is to adopt these to across all of their work sets, from just like helping with email to complex data analysis. And with that, I think the other lessons learned is because I'm an engineer of background, I love numbers, math, and and when I think of how to use generative AI and how I normally use it, I use it for complex data analysis. As I've seen as we've worked across other users with different backgrounds, from the HR side to the policy side, they come about it in different ways. So I've seen other people use it in ways I've never thought of before and now adopt it to my use case. Like
Unli-
I was taking a class and they were doing, in the class, the professor used it to build, venture capital startup briefs and had
Wow.
it build new startup ideas in next 5 minutes, ready to brief a VC firm.
Unleashing those beautiful minds. Ramesh, top lesson learned for you.
I think we need to address the cultural aspect of change. We need to go in with a growth mindset. We need to ensure we understand our entire AI portfolio across the community to avoid duplication and optimize our capital allocation to the portfolio. And above and beyond, most important is our ability to attract and retain top talent to support the critical work of national security.
Really do appreciate that. Stuart, top lesson learned for you.
Yeah, going off the point I made before, if you look at Ukraine and CENTCOM, recent engagements we're seeing our partners as well as our own military department addressing, I think it's the learning and adaptation piece. So a couple thoughts there on what we're seeing and what we think we're learning there. So I think what we're seeing is that organizations oriented and prepared to adapt their field capabilities through automatically collected data and personnel who are prepared to calibrate those systems are demonstrating quite clearly they're defeating more static competitors. What we're seeing in these spaces now are basically digital warfare laboratories. Countries are running the measure countermeasure cycle, i.e., the speed to adapt or speed to change versus adapting to that change by an adversary in sub 24-hour timeframes, right? And for those that don't adapt fast enough, in the case of drone warfare, the drones just fall out of the sky, right? So we need to be prepared. I think the lesson here is we need to be prepared to do this. And to do that, we must reorganize, retrain our workforce, and rethink the risk of deploying software, given that the measure countermeasure cycle has now dropped to sub 24 hours.
Really do appreciate that. Well, we're going to have to fast forward and wrap it up here. And fast forward being, think about 2 to 3 years from now. Chad, I'm going to start with you. What are we going to look like in 2 to 3 years from now? What are you going to be focusing your attention on? What's the prediction going to be from the customer about what the ask is?
Yeah, I think and it's coming probably even faster than 2 to 3 years, but we expect, as I mentioned earlier, agentic workflows to really begin to just change the way people work in much more efficient and frankly enjoyable ways. As many studies have said, an average employee in the federal government interacts with 10 to 15 different systems every day as they're trying to do their job. And these agentic workflows can bring all that again into a single pane of glass to make the job much more enjoyable, efficient, and get rid of a lot of the challenging friction a person experiences. So we see that being the future, and some of it will come actually, I think, later this year. And then as you work in more and more systems, that will take several years to have the full vision I just painted, I think, transpired. And the other thing we're really excited now, in a partnership with NVIDIA for us as well, is bringing a much more dynamic and rapid kind of AI interaction with video as well, as we're building some capability with NVIDIA to really search through and ask questions of your video, and it search through the database to understand when a particular action occurred or something like that. So I think agentic workflows and what I'd say video AI interaction are the two areas we're most excited about in the next couple of years.
Super cool. I love the idea that the future is now. Greg, Pure Storage, 2 to 3 years from now, what's it going to look like?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot simpler. It's going to have to be, right? Because the amount of data is going to be distributed, the amount of data center footprint that's going to have to be consumed is going to be exponential, right? So we kind of take it a different approach. Can we make anything simpler, right? I'm going to use an analogy. You go back to the old days of, music sharing back when, we were a lot younger. You would have, a CD you would share with someone, or an external USB drive, you kind of pass it around. But as online file sharing became prevalent, it's kind of an afterthought, right? Hey, we're on a distributed streaming platform right now, right? So when I think about that, what if a customer could have that same sort of experience with their data? I mean, it's a consistent connection, cohesive fabric that can, no matter the interface, can operate and maintain the exact same way long term. That's what we're driving towards for our customers. And that's with something like our concept of what we call an enterprise data platform, this secure distributed access to data, no matter where it resides, I think is crucial for driving short-term gains like faster app performance, no matter the storage interface again, but reduce infrastructure footprint by 85%. That's table stakes with what we're doing for our customers. But most importantly, that seamless API integration from some, so it's whether it's a AI model, if it's a traditional application, if you're trying to bridge the gap between the two, you have consistency for your data, you have security for your data at scale. But at the end of the day, it's all about the experience. Can I have the look and feel of a consistent way to scale and maintain my AI applications and the data associated with it, and not hit those high watermarks that everyone's scared about? That concept we've talked about, I can touch on, is hyperscaler capabilities without the hyperscaler cost.
Love the simplification aspect. Really do appreciate that. John, Red Hat, what's it going to look like 2 to 3 years from now?
Yeah, so I think the what we're seeing is, I think in the future here is explosion of capability across the open source community. We're seeing lots of information being shared in places like Hugging Face. We're going to be iterating on those capabilities, bringing those, really focused on bringing those to our customers. The best of open source. We're also, I think, another thing you'll see is that smaller models that can work with lower energy, lower footprint, that can be used in edge environments. I'm talking not just like the edge of on Earth and terrestrial, but also in low Earth orbit, eventually on the moon and Mars. We're reaching for the stars in the next couple of years here.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to see AI being able to be pushed into these environments because we become so much more efficient with not just sort of the model size, but in inference, in analysis capability with fewer GPUs, with lower energy needs. So I think we're going to be seeing that as we're trying to get as efficient as we can with all of these these very energy hungry AI technologies. So I see that as being the thing you'll see iterating very quickly over the next 18 to 24 months.
Really do appreciate that. Stuart, what are we going to look like on those ships 2 to 3 years from now?
Ships and ashore. Yes, indeed. I think what we're starting to see the trend line now, but I think it's going to be even more evident in the next kind of 3 to 5 years, which is the number of kind of senior technical personnel. So I think that basically decisions are going to move from sort of qualitative decision making and qualitative experiential decision making to really being data driven. That's my expectation or hope, at least. If we're successful, that's how it should be. And so we're going to just what we're going to see is in the rooms where decisions are being made. Increasingly, we're already seeing it. They're going to be looking at data. They'll be looking at data products. They'll be querying an LLM live. And relying on digital insights increasingly to make decisions. they also, I think, are going to trust those digital technologies increasingly. There's just going to be a oversaturation of information. There's just no way to read all the bits. And so the machines are going to have to do it and decipher that picture for senior leaders who are making decisions.
Interesting concept on the trust level going up. So I really appreciate that. Looking forward to it. Ramesh, DIA, 2 to 3 years from now, what will you be focusing your attention on?
I think we will be in a very interesting time. We will see some more surprises from our commercial partners, which will rapidly change the power of digital platforms. And that will unleash a lot of things like agents that Chad was mentioning. I mean, we will have a lot of proliferation of agents across different workflows, processes, and we'll have a whole different challenge. How do you govern all these digital agents and AI agents running around now, similar to how we manage our human beings? So we have to really, the ecosystem is evolving. It's definitely going to be unleashing the power of data with AI. We will have a lot of advantages in our warfighting and intelligence capabilities. But at the same time, we need to ensure we have enterprise governance framework, portfolio management, and clear governance of what is happening where, how, so we can also ensure we have cyber hygiene in these new capabilities we are releasing very fast at a very accelerated pace. So I think it really, we need to ensure we have the talent to do these things like verification, validation, AI security, red teaming. So we need to really wrap up our capabilities to ensure we have these foundational capabilities to leverage the power of digital platforms and AI, whether it's Gen AI agents, edge AI, neuromorphic AI, analog AI. There's all kinds of things. Like I know John mentioned about cost reduction. That is going to happen with quantization. We saw from DeepSeek how a Chinese company was able to do something on par with the well-invested hundreds of billions of dollars company with almost similar performance, although we don't know the whole story how they did it. That being said, there will be innovation in the market. The markets to some level will change and evolve and pivot. And the country that controls the AI will have both economic and military advantage in long term.
Appreciate that and looking forward to it. John, take us home here. Rapid capability cell. You'll be spinning off a lot of capabilities over the next couple of years. What can we expect 2 to 3 years from now?
Yeah, I think we'll see a lot of seamless integration of generative AI and frontier AI into all of the apps and programs that the DoD and we use personally. So at this point, you won't notice a separation between like what you're using, be that Microsoft Word or your email application to your more complex military application that you're using. That there will be these tools just baked into them. And to enable that, the CDAO will have succeeded in providing for the DoD access to all the multiple models, because I think we've seen clearly that the model companies all perform differently and are good at different things. So we need to provide access to those across the DoD and into a seamless multi-cloud, multi-compute backend so that we can leverage all the different compute GPUs available across all the many cloud service providers at the time we need it, both to do massive cost efficiency so that if one is less expensive than another, we can leverage that, and also for the scale, talking to Stuart's night after point, where if we need to leverage that scale, we have the ability to leverage it across the entirety of the defense industrial base.
Listen, I really do appreciate it, and I'd like to thank all of our guests for taking the time out of their busy schedule to join us on this program. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make our program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum, part of the Federal News Network.